community within Luxembourg, but quite frankly within all of Luxembourg, in my opinion, have been honored to have an exceptional American ambassador. Ambassador Barrett is smart, and at the same time as being smart, well-connected, he also is a very human gentleman who cares about people. And he's a brilliant public speaker. It has been a pleasure to have him here for the past 3 years, and it's my honor to introduce him to you this evening. Mr. Ambassador.
Boyan. Good evening, one and all. I want to thank you very, very much for including me among your speakers tonight. I have several things that I have prepared so that I don't deviate too much from the remarks that we put together. But I want to thank you, Paul, for inviting me, and I want to reciprocate the compliment. It's been a wonderful experience the last 3 years working with you, and I thank you very much. I want to thank Deloitte as well for hosting us tonight. It's a great, great opportunity to be here this evening. I look at the title here, Transatlantic Trade and Investment, and all I can think of is whoever decided to have this event tonight is a genius, because there is probably nothing more topical right now than what's going to happen between the United States and its trading partners, not just here in Europe, but throughout the world. And I have been blessed over the past 3 years to be the ambassador here in Luxembourg. I am not a career diplomat. In fact, I was a member of Congress for 10 years. I was the mayor of Milwaukee, Wisconsin for close to 18 years. And I will be eternally grateful to President Biden for asking me to represent him, to represent the State Department, and to represent the United States people here in the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. For both my wife and for me, this has been just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So, one of the things that is drilled into us, particularly at this time of year, is that there is only one president at a time. This is sort of an adage from the State Department. And I was thinking about that, and then just before I came, I happened to look at a New York Times article from today, which basically put an exclamation point on this, but in a little bit of a different way. And this is from today's newspaper. And the article begins with this. The old adage about the interregnum between the election and an inauguration is that there is only one president at a time. Try telling that to the rest of the world now. And I think that's the perfect place for us to start. Because just this week, we've experienced several extraordinary events that really bridge the gap between President Biden's administration and the incoming administration of President Trump. On Monday, again this pertains to trade, President-elect Trump, of course, issued a statement talking about increases in tariffs between 3 incredibly important trade partners in the United States. Those 3 trade partners, of course, were China, Mexico, and Canada. You can't get much more important than those three trade partners, even though obviously Europe is immensely important as well. So that was Monday. The following day, President Biden very, very happily announced the temporary, hopefully permanent ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. So within basically 24 or 36 hours, you had 2 presidents making major, major announcements pertaining to international relationships between the United States and different countries in the world. I think over the next 54 days, we're going to continue to see that. Fortunately, in the last 24, 36 hours, some of the legal documents have been signed by the incoming president's administration that will allow a more orderly transfer of information. Because at this time, in any country, but certainly in the United States, it is imperative that there is a mutual understanding and a good working relationship between the incoming administration and the outgoing administration. And by signing these documents, I think that was a significant step forward in making sure that that information is passed correctly. This is extremely important for the State Department, and Lewis is here and others who work for the State Department, because the State Department is absolutely nonpartisan. The State Department's job is to represent the administration in the United States overseas. And its job is not to be embroiled in the politics of the day. And it does a very, very good job. That is one of the primary reasons that our staff goes through these remarks and makes sure that I don't do anything wrong as a former politician, that I realize that I am pure as the driven snow when it comes to making these remarks. And this is not about politics. This is about the relationship between the United States government, the United States people, other countries, and other cultures in the world. So the obvious question, though, is, okay, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen now? And I've been asked this question many, many times, and I've been asked it on different levels. What's going to happen between the United States and Luxembourg? What's going to happen between the United States and the European Union? What's going to happen between the United States and NATO? What's going to happen between the United States and Ukraine or the Mideast? So I want to start with Luxembourg, because I'm the bilateral ambassador to Luxembourg. And this is the area where I can provide the most calm reassurance that everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And I say that with a great deal of confidence for three reasons. First, and maybe foremost, and this was alluded to, is the history between the United States and Luxembourg. In less than a month, we will have commemorations for the 5,000 plus individuals, Americans, who lost their lives and are buried in the Ham Cemetery. This is a cemetery that the foreign minister referred to. Of course, there were many, many more Americans who were killed here in December, January, February of 1944 and 1945 in what the foreign minister described as the largest battle in the history of Luxembourg that is fought on the soil of Luxembourg. Over 5,000 young men are buried at Ham. Those are young men who came to a country that many of them had never heard of and gave their lives to protect and defend Luxembourg. Among those individuals, actually killed right over the border in Germany, was my own mother's first husband. My mother was 22 years old, from Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and married a young man from Rhinelander, Wisconsin, in June of 1944. December 17th, the second day of the Battle of the Bulge, he was killed just over the border in Germany. So my own mother, again, married for 6 months, became a widow at 23. Fortunately, she met my father and had a life where she raised 4 children and had a good life. But that was always something that was in our family. She didn't talk about it, not surprisingly. But it was always something that we remembered. And I have to tell you that when President Biden asked me to take this position, I thought, wow, the circle of life goes round. I'm going to be going back to the area where my mother's first husband was killed. And that has made this experience more meaningful for me on a very personal level because of the importance to my own family. My father was involved in World War II as well as a navigator, flying some 35 missions based out of England over primarily Germany. So World War II, the aftermath of World War II, is strong in my family. But it's that bond between Luxembourg and America, which is one of the primary reasons that I have total confidence that our relationship is not only going to remain strong, but is going to get even stronger. And again, in the next few weeks, we will see these commemorations. And as an American here in Luxembourg, I have been amazed at what a phenomenal job the Luxembourg government and the people of Luxembourg have done to make sure that people don't forget those sacrifices. So I say thank you to the Luxembourg government and the people of Luxembourg for remembering the sacrifices that the Americans made back in 1944. So that's pillar number one. Pillar number two, and again this was alluded to by others, is the incredibly strong economic ties between the United States and Luxembourg. It is really quite phenomenal when you look at the investment that is made between these two countries. And primarily the investment is in the financial field. And so part of my confidence is even when we have these discussions about trade and tariffs and what's going to happen and our country's going to retaliate, or what is the United States truly going to do, not just with Mexico and China and Canada, but what is it going to do in terms of tariffs between the United States and Europe? And how is Europe going to respond to those tariffs? Because so much of our trade is in the financial area, it doesn't have the same impact. Some 68% of the trade between the United States and Luxembourg is essentially in the financial field. Now, obviously, there are other aspects, the steel aspect, Boeing and airplanes coming back and forth. Those are different topics and probably are going to deserve some attention. But the underlying basis of our relationship is a fiscal trading relationship. And that is the second reason that I feel so strongly that our relationship is going to remain strong. The third reason is the shared values. And I don't think you can underestimate the importance of these shared values. The belief in democracy, of open government, of transparency, of respect for individuals. Those are core values of Luxembourg. They are core values of the United States. Not every country on this planet shares those values. And so you've got those values that provide the third pillar of this incredibly strong relationship between our two countries. So again, I say with a high degree of confidence that when you're talking the United States and Luxembourg, relax. It's going to be good. European Union, you'll have to buy me a pitcher of beer. We'll sit down and we'll discuss this as to what's going to happen. Because I cannot say with any certainty what's going to happen there. And I don't think there's anybody in this room who can say with certainty what's going to happen. Again, I think many of us who follow this closely understand that President Trump has a history of making statements, sometimes really meaning what he says, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, sometimes as a bargaining tool or as an opening salvo. And that's what the speculation is this week. You've got the issues of fentanyl, you've got the issues of immigration as it pertains to Mexico. How is that going to impact what really happens come January 20th and subsequent to that? Will these tariffs go into place? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody in this room knows the answer to that. But that is certainly a question that's going to happen. What's going to happen between the United States and NATO? This to me has been one of the more interesting topics because I think many people forget that it was actually under President Obama that the Wales Pledge was made. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Wales Pledge. The Wales Pledge was that the members of NATO would strive to reach 2% of their gross domestic product in defense. That was done some 10, 11 years ago. And there was a small amount of progress that was made while President Obama was in office. During President Trump's first term, obviously there was a much different approach, a much louder approach, and there was a small degree of progress made, not significantly more than under President Obama. Under President Biden, again, a small bit of progress was being made, and then came February of 2022, and Putin launched the unprovoked attack against Ukraine. And in the last 1,000 days, we have seen a significant change, not just here in Luxembourg, but throughout Europe as to defense spending. Something that President Macron has talked about extensively, the need for Europe to really support itself in many ways when it comes to defense. So I would posit that the progress that we have seen under 3 consecutive United States presidents was a factor in increasing the defense spending for Luxembourg and other countries. But the real factor, and the person who has had the greatest impact in increasing that spending, has been Putin. Because for the first time since World War II, in Europe, certainly in Western Europe, there is a concern as to what's going to happen. And that continues to this day. And I applaud the government of Luxembourg for starting to make that move. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense have made it clear that they are shooting to get to the 2%. and there's a little asterisk, if you will, for Luxembourg because of the trans-border workers, but to get to that 2% by 2030. That's important, but I don't know that that's the end of the story, because at the most recent NATO meetings, the conversation was not 2%, but was 3%. And if you go to some of the countries that are closer to Russia, you are certainly going to see a higher amount of defense spending. That's going to have an impact here in Luxembourg. That's going to have an impact throughout all of Europe as to what's going to happen. So again, you've got the dynamic at play that now that Russia is being aggressive, not just in what we're seeing in Ukraine, but in other parts of Europe as well. We don't know exactly how that's going to change, but that's going to have an impact. So I want to also, though, spend some time on China. And here I want to be more specific with my comments, because I think this is very, very important. We also need to consider our business relations with authoritarian regimes, including the People's Republic of China. The United States and Europe share an understanding that relations with the PRC are multifaceted, comprising elements of cooperation, competition, and systemic rivalry. The United States, as everyone here knows, also does business with China. We do so transparently, based on clear rules, and with due concern for the security interests of our allies. I want to be clear that we do not expect every country to have the exact same assessment of China as we do. And we do not seek to block any country from growing their economy. But we are concerned and we are cautious. This is because of the deepening strategic partnership between the PRC and Russia, and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut the rule-based international order that run counter to our values and our shared interests between the United States and Europe. The fact is that the PRC has offered diplomatic, rhetorical, material, and economic support for Russia's unprovoked invasion of a sovereign country. Beijing has amplified Russian disinformation that it has, quote, legitimate security interests, quote, justifying its invasion. PRC companies are literally rebuilding Russia's military-industrial base. The PRC is providing critical support to Russia's defense industrial base. This is important. 70% of the machine tools that Russia is importing are coming from China. 90% of the microelectronics it needs are coming from China. That support has enabled Russia to keep its defense industrial base going, to keep the war machine going. The bottom line is that the PRC is fueling the most significant threat to European security since the end of the Cold War, and Russia would struggle to sustain its assault on Ukraine without China's support. These actions cannot be viewed in isolation. When democracy is under threat anywhere, it endangers us all. Russia's war in Ukraine poses a grave threat not only to European security, but also to global prosperity. Even here in Luxembourg, we have experienced firsthand the immediacy of such risks. Flights disrupted by blocked GPS systems, satellites jammed, and major cyber attacks targeting critical institutions here in Luxembourg. So in the context of advancing our trade and investment goals, we all have a duty to pursue growth and benefits responsibly and assess risks soberly. We all, as governments, businesses, organizations, and individuals, must be firm that our values are non-negotiable. We cannot market ourselves for short-term economic gain as flexible about our values. Why? Because the stakes are higher than we've ever witnessed in our lifetime. But I strongly believe that as long as we stand for who we are at the very core, both Luxembourg and the United States will continue to prosper together. Ultimately, our relationship isn't just about big, impressive numbers. It's about people. People who work together because of their shared beliefs in democracy, transparency, and the rule of law. Again, thank you, AmCham and Deloitte, for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm looking forward to the fruitful discussion that follows. Have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a really great speech. And obviously, thank you very much for all you have done in the time